So I wrote this. About you, he said, and then started reading a sex scene I never gave him permission to see. You ever sit in a room with two people, one paid to listen, the other pretending to be vulnerable, and suddenly realize you're about to be set on fire emotionally, and no one's calling the fire department? Yeah, that was couples therapy with Max. Session 3. Our therapist, a gentle man named Greg with Patagonia vests and empathy eyes, had asked, "Would either of you like to share something you've been afraid to say out loud?" I was ready to admit I pulled away. Not because I stopped loving Max, but because somewhere between last spring's separation and now, I forgot how to talk to him without feeling like I owed him a TED talk on my emotions. But before I could even inhale, Max pulled a leather-bound journal out of his messenger bag. My journal. My fucking journal. I felt the blood drain from my face. He looked me straight in the eye, opened it slowly like it was scripture, and said, "So I wrote this. About you." And then he started reading. But it wasn't his writing. It was mine. I recognized every sentence. Because I'd written it 2 months ago. Page 46. Sometimes I fantasize about never coming home. Not because I want to leave him, but because I want to remember who I am when I'm not being observed. Page 47. The way James touched me wasn't desperate, it was curious. Like he wanted to learn me, not own me. Greg nodded thoughtfully. This is powerful, Max, really brave. I sat there frozen, watching my private thoughts become a TED talk on my own betrayal. And the kicker, he didn't even flinch when he said James's name. He just kept going, calmly, methodically, like he was reading his own pain when really he was reading mine. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. Where did you get that? Max paused, acted like this was a tangent. You left it in the nightstand, I figured, if we're talking about honesty. I blinked. You read my diary. Greg frowned. This wasn't shared writing. No, I said, my voice cracking. It was private. Max shrugged. So was the fact that you slept with someone else. And that's when I knew. He hadn't come here to fix anything. He came to perform justice. In the safest space I thought we had left. And the worst part, he rehearsed it. Every word. He weaponized my own words and coded them in the language of emotional honesty. Greg looked at me confused now. Is this true? Yes, I whispered. But what I didn't say. It was during the months Max was crashing on his brother's couch and refusing to answer my texts. When I'd go 4 days without hearing from him. When therapy was his idea, but only after I told him I wanted to separate for real. I wrote it down because I wasn't ready to say it out loud. Because I wanted to understand it first before I broke someone else's heart. But Max, he wanted revenge. With footnotes. And now, my inner life was content. I stared at the rug. At the cup of untouched tea Greg gave me at the beginning of the session. It had gone cold. Just like this marriage. Before therapy, before James, before he ever touched my journal, Max and I were a normal couple. Which is to say, we hadn't looked each other in the eye for 6 months. We shared a Google Calendar. We shared a Hulu account. We shared a bed, sort of. But every conversation felt like reading a weather report out loud and pretending that counted as connection. How was your day? Fine. Need anything from Trader Joe? No. You good? Yeah, you. And then silence. Followed by clinking forks. Followed by both of us checking our phones, pretending we weren't disappointed that the other wasn't saying more. We weren't in a war. We were in a truce, no one was winning. I'd pick up Thai takeout every Thursday. Massam and curry for me, green curry for him. He'd eat exactly half, then slide the rest into the fridge where it would sit for 3 days before he threw it away with a sigh. I once asked him, "Do you still like this?" He said, "It's just food." And that's when I knew we were in trouble. Because when someone stops tasting what you make, they've already started swallowing something else. We tried to talk once. In June. I remember because it was the night I left my phone on the couch, screen up, and he saw James's name in a text preview. I hadn't replied, it wasn't even flirtatious. It was literally, "Thanks for the coffee, let me know if you want to keep talking." Max didn't ask. He just walked into the bedroom and slammed the door. 3 hours later, he texted me from 5 feet away. "Max, maybe we need a break." I wanted to ask, from what talking, sleeping in the same room, pretending? But I didn't. Instead, I said, "Okay." And that was the night I started writing again. Not because I had something to say, but because I was the only one listening. I kept the journal under the bed, not locked, not hidden, just private. I never wrote James's name at first. Just feelings. Tension, warmth, regret, want. When Max moved in with his brother, just for a few weeks, I didn't chase him. I just let the silence stretch. And in that silence, I met James again. He wasn't dramatic, he didn't press. He listened like he actually wanted to know how I felt, instead of preparing his rebuttal. We kissed once, 2 weeks after Max left. And when we slept together, it was soft, gentle, like touching someone who didn't want to fix me, just hold what was left. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I felt guilty, but because I knew how it would sound. Poor guy leaves to figure things out, and you jump into bed with someone else. But here's the thing no one tells you about separation. You don't stop needing closeness just because your marriage went on pause. You just stop pretending it's coming back. After a month, Max texted me again. Said he wanted to talk. He'd found a therapist. Said we could try if I was willing. And God help me, I wanted to believe him. I wanted the story where people break down and build back stronger. So I said yes. I said I'd go. And I did. Every Tuesday. I sat on that stupid couch and talked about patterns and defenses and emotional labor. And Max, he mostly sat silent. Until that one day. Until my voice came out of his mouth. And now I wonder if he ever really wanted to repair anything at all. Or if therapy was just the final stage of control, where he got to win the argument by quoting me back to myself. The version of me I only let live on the page. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of what he read, but because of what it meant that he read it at all. There's something that breaks inside you when someone rifles through your soul and calls it communication. The next morning, I made eggs and toast like a woman trying to pretend her marriage wasn't built on spyware logic. Max walked into the kitchen like nothing happened. Like he didn't just unzip my inner life in front of a therapist with a smile on his face. "Want coffee?" I asked. He nodded, no apology, no follow-up, just that casual silence he wore like cologne. When I handed him the mug, I said it. "You stole my journal." He took a sip. "You left it out." "No," I said. "I left it in the bedroom, on my side, under a pile of laundry. That's not out. That's mine." He shrugged. "You've always said I don't listen. I was listening." My stomach dropped. "You read it." He met my eyes for the first time since the session. "I read us." That's when I realized he genuinely believed he had the right. Like the contents of my heart were community property now. I sat down. "Did you read all of it?" He didn't answer right away. Which means yes. Yes, he read about James. Yes, he read about the time I stood in front of the mirror for 20 minutes in a bra I didn't even like, wondering if I could still feel sexy without feeling ashamed. Yes, he read about the dream where I finally said everything I was thinking, and he left, not because I hurt him, but because he couldn't control the version of me that told the truth. And now he was here, calling it honesty. You could have asked, I whispered. You could have let me tell you myself. He leaned against the counter, casual, like we were discussing grocery budgets. I didn't think you would. I figured if you wrote it, it meant something. It meant it was mine, I snapped. It wasn't a monologue waiting for applause. That's when he got smug. Like the kind of smug that comes with fake growth. You've always wanted me to open up emotionally. Well, this was my way of showing I'm listening. I'm reflecting. I used your language because it's the only thing that ever got through to you. I laughed. Out loud. A cold, humorless thing that made my own skin crawl. You didn't reflect, you plagiarized. He stepped forward just a little. And what would you have said, huh? Would you have brought up James? Would you have told Greg about the night in the bar parking lot, or the text you deleted before I came home from work? I froze. He kept going. I saw that too, in the journal. Now I felt exposed. Not emotionally. Physically. Like I was standing naked in front of someone who didn't just look. He archived. You were never going to tell me, he said, quiet now. You were going to process it on paper, then pretend it didn't happen. Because I was scared, I said, voice breaking. Of what? Of this, of you. Of how you'd use it to prove that my version of love is less valid than yours. He didn't reply. Just sipped his coffee again and muttered, You should have thought about that before writing it. And that. That was the moment the room got cold. Because now I knew. It wasn't just about betrayal. It was about ownership. To him, my story was only sacred if he told it. Preferably with edits. Preferably in therapy. Preferably in a way that made me look unstable, and him, emotionally mature. I wrote those words for me, I said, so I wouldn't go numb. Well, they woke me up, he said. And I wanted to scream. Because he still didn't get it. Reading my journal wasn't vulnerability. It was violation. And now I couldn't unsee the truth. He never wanted to know me. He wanted to win me. And when that didn't work, he wanted to narrate me. Better than I could narrate myself. So I got up, went into the bedroom, pulled the journal from the nightstand, and put it in my bag. Not to hide it, but because I was done letting him speak through me. From now on, I was going to speak for myself. And if that meant saying everything out loud, so be it. I don't know what scared me more, that he read my diary or that he read it so well. Like he'd studied the cadence, matched my voice, paused in all the right places, performed my pain better than I ever could. So the next week in therapy, I came ready. Greg asked, as usual, what would you like to share today? And I said, loud and clear, I'd like to read something I wrote, this time in my voice. Max's eyebrows barely twitched. I opened my bag, took out the same leather journal, pages flagged, bookmarked, creased at the corners where my hands shook too much to fold neatly. I didn't start with James. I started with this. He used to make me laugh just by walking into the room. Now I flinch when I hear his footsteps because I don't know what version of him I'm getting today, the cold strategist or the man who brings me a coffee and calls it love. Greg nodded, eyes soft. Max shifted in his chair. Then I read. I didn't cheat because I wanted someone new. I cheated because I wanted to remember what it felt like to be wanted without a footnote. I wanted to exist without being studied. Max laughed under his breath. I looked up, something funny. He shook his head. No, just hearing you say it out loud is interesting. Greg tilted his head. How so? And Max said it. Casually. Like it was a throwaway. I already have this recorded. The silence hit like a dropped plate. Greg blinked. You recorded this. Max shrugged. Not this exact moment, but yeah, I've been recording our sessions, for reference, to make sure I don't misrepresent anything later. My jaw dropped. You recorded us, without telling me. Max raised both hands. It's not illegal, I checked, and it's only for my own clarity, so I don't get twisted around when we leave here. Greg leaned forward. Max, recording therapy without consent violates the trust of the room, even if it's not technically illegal. Did you really not think this would be invasive? He looked between us, then straight at me, and said, I don't trust her to tell the truth. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I said, you trust a recording over my actual voice. He nodded. As long as it's documented, it's real. That's when it clicked. He didn't want connection. He wanted evidence. Of his pain. Of my guilt. Of how reasonable he sounded, and how emotionally unstable I was when I cried. He was building a case. And I was the primary witness against myself. You've been compiling all of this, I asked, breath-catching. For what, divorce court, your memoir? He smiled, that subtle, smug little smile I'd started to hate more than his silence. For clarity. I stood up. I'm done. Greg raised a hand gently. You don't have to leave, you have the right to. I know what I have the right to, I said, voice shaking. And apparently I've already said too much. In print, in therapy, in my own fucking house. Max said nothing. Just pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. I caught a glimpse of the app. Voice recorder. A full list. Dated, time-stamped. Session 1, Session 2, Session 3. Every word I'd said was archived. And still he looked confused. Like I was the one overreacting. Greg asked him softly, why didn't you tell her? Max shrugged. Because I knew she'd try to curate what she said if she knew she was being recorded. And I wanted to scream. Because that was exactly what he did with my diary. He cherry-picked. He curated. He edited me into a character with a single dimension. Unfaithful, guilty, emotional. He turned therapy into a transcript. And still had the nerve to call it healing. I walked out before the session ended. For the first time, I didn't care how it made me look. I didn't leave to be dramatic. I left because I needed to hear my own breath again, without it being recorded. I didn't go home after the session. I went to my friend Monica's apartment and sat on her floor for 3 hours, wrapped in one of those fake fur throws she keeps around for emotional emergencies. We didn't talk much. She just handed me a mug of lemon ginger tea and quietly queued up a playlist called Men Are Exhausting, But You're Still Magic. At some point, I said, he recorded everything. Monica looked up from her phone. He what? I nodded, like, all the sessions, our fights, maybe even our morning conversations. I don't know, there were timestamps. She sat upright. He's building a digital archive of your trauma. I nodded again. I felt like I was nodding through someone else's breakdown. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't spiral the way I used to, packing, texting myself notes, trying to logic my way out of the pain. This time I just sat there. Still. Quiet. And then, at some point between numb, Baijer and Monica, falling asleep with a half-eaten granola bar on her chest, I opened the Notes app on my phone. Typed, if you're going to quote me, get it right. I didn't know yet what I was writing. I just knew I needed to write it before he did. Because Max would. Eventually. He'd use therapy as proof of his moral high ground. He tell someone, maybe a future partner, maybe a therapist, maybe a podcast, that he tried everything, that he listened, that he opened up. He'd leave out the part where he took my journal and made it a script. He'd skip over the recordings. He'd reduce James to the guy she used to punish me. He'd call it heartbreak. He'd call it growth. And if I didn't say something first, my story would always have his name on the byline. So I opened my laptop, pulled up the original journal file, and I started editing. Not censoring. Just reframing. Adding context, adding my voice, my hesitations, my guilt, my anger, not as footnotes but as narration. I wrote about the separation, about the loneliness, about how I missed Max even when he was in the room, about how James didn't replace anything, he just reminded me I had a pulse. I wrote about how I wrote, about how journaling became my way of remembering who I was outside of being someone's wife, someone's emotional responsibility. I wrote about the therapy sessions, word for word, including the moment Max opened the journal and called it his. And then I wrote this. Men always want honesty, until it comes in a voice they didn't rehearse for, until it's written in a tone they can't control, until it says something about them that wasn't run through their emotional filter first. It was raw. It was unfiltered. It was mine. I posted the essay on Medium, anonymously at first. Tagged it, Relationship Recovery, Emotional Control, When ihr Husband ihr Journal, Betrayal. I expected 10 views, maybe 20. Within 3 days, it had 15,000. By the end of the week, it had been shared on Reddit, Twitter, and a feminist blog called The Rage Shelf. Someone messaged me. This was the first time I realized I'm not crazy for wanting privacy in therapy. Another wrote, he read your diary and called it dialogue. You flipped the script. Monica printed out the article and hung it on her fridge like a child's painting. I wasn't famous. I wasn't healed. But I was heard. And then an email. From a blog editor at FemTruth. Subject line, we'd love to feature your piece. They wanted to republish it, with a byline, under my real name if I was ready. I hesitated, but only for a second. Then I wrote back. Yes, let's do it, and I'll write a follow-up. Title, How to Spot the Man Who Only Cries When You're the One Bleeding. Because I wasn't afraid of being messy anymore. I was afraid of being rewritten. And now I own the pen. I didn't expect Max to stay quiet forever. He's the kind of man who believes if he just explains long enough, eventually everyone will understand why he's the real victim. So when FemTruth published my piece, this time with my real name, a short bio, and a soft, grayscale photo of me drinking tea like I hadn't set a relationship on fire in 3,000 words, I knew what was coming. And it came 2 days later. A Medium post. Same platform. Titled, When Honesty Hurts, A Husband's Perspective on Therapy, Betrayal, and Growth. I clicked. Of course I clicked. It opened with, I never wanted to tell this story, but when your private life becomes public, sometimes silence feels like guilt, and I won't carry that anymore. Max. Always the martyr. He went on for 16 paragraphs. About how he respected my need for space. How he tried to rebuild trust through communication. How the act of reading something doesn't make you abusive, it makes you informed. He even included this gem. When she wrote about her affair, I didn't shame her. I listened. I processed. I brought it into the one place we both agreed to be honest, therapy. Except he didn't bring it. He ambushed me with it, repackaged my shame as his breakthrough. But here's the thing. It didn't work this time. Because the comment section was brutal. Imagine recording your wife and calling it healing. This is the most narcissistic essay I've ever read. You plagiarized her voice and called it your truth. My ex did the same thing. This isn't growth, it's control. You didn't respond, you got exposed. There were over 3,000 comments by morning. By noon, someone had made a TikTok reading his essay in an overly dramatic voice while playing the Succession theme in the background. Another stitched my article with the quote, he cries better than he listens. And then, a DM from Max. Just 2 words. You win. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I felt victorious, but because I finally understood something. This was never about winning. It was about numbing, calling something what it is. Control, manipulation, narrative theft, the illusion of intimacy built on surveillance. And when I finally named it, others did too. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to his Medium post. Scrolled down. Left one comment. Just this. Thank you for quoting me again. That was it. No fight. No follow-up. No let's talk. Just a sentence. And then I logged off. Closed the tab. And closed that chapter of my life like I should have the first time I caught him rereading old texts from me like they were clues instead of memories. I still keep a journal. Not the leather one. A plain yellow notebook with no lock, no lined pages, no bookmarks. Just space. Space for me. No one else gets to read it. No therapist. No boyfriend. No well-meaning friend who says, just vent. Because now I understand, some words aren't meant to be witnessed. Some words are just exhaled. After Max's post faded from the algorithm, and my story made its way through Reddit threads and Facebook shares and TikTok duets, things got quiet. Not awkward quiet. Not resentful quiet. Real quiet. The kind where nothing's echoing in your head anymore except your own voice, and you're not afraid of it. That's how I knew I'd won. Not because people believed me. Not because Max lost followers or friends. But because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. I wrote the truth. And it stood. Unshaken. I was invited to write a series for FemTruth. They titled it Narrative Theft, When Men Tell Your Story First. The comment section was filled with women saying things like, I thought I was the only one, or I kept wondering why I felt violated, even though no one touched me. One woman wrote, he read my journals and used them to understand me better. But then he used those same entries in every fight. He made my words his sword. I cried when I read that. Because that's what it is, isn't it? Weaponized vulnerability. The illusion of deep connection, that's actually just surveillance wrapped in intimacy. Max didn't listen to me. He mined me. Treated my thoughts like raw data for a personality report he could read out loud when it benefited him. And the worst part, for a long time, I thought that was love. That attention, any attention, meant understanding. That someone quoting you meant they heard you. But now I know better. Real love doesn't require proof. Real intimacy doesn't need playback. It lives in silence, in eye contact, in the freedom to be messy without being recorded. I've started dadding again. Slowly. No big promises, no dramatic story arcs. Just walks, conversations, people who laugh with their shoulders, not their scripts. And when someone asks me what happened with my ex, I tell them the short version. He didn't cheat, he didn't hit, he just narrated me until I forgot what my own voice sounded like. They usually blink. Then nod. Because that's the kind of pain you can't always explain. Only recognize. So yeah, I still write. I write because writing is the only way I've ever truly known what I felt. But now I don't write for someone else to read. I don't write to prove I'm worthy. I write because it keeps my voice in my body. And if someone ever asks to read it, I'll say no. Because my story isn't up for cross-examination. It's not a testimony. It's not a thread. It's mine. And that's the part Max never understood. You can't steal someone's story and expect it to end the way you want. Because the second you take their pen, you've already lost. Subscribe to my Mia's Stories YouTube channel for raw, emotional stories and authentic insights that encourage healing, growth, and understanding. Don't forget to be part of a supportive space where stories inspire and lessons resonate. What do you think about this story? Let us know in the comments. Your opinion truly matters to us, and we're here for you.